The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as the audience awaited the arrival of NASA astronaut Sunita Williams. Having recently returned from an unexpected 9-month mission aboard the International Space Station, ISS, her story had captivated the nation. Originally slated for a brief 8-day mission, unforeseen technical issues with Boeing's Starliner spacecraft had extended her stay to an unprecedented 286 days. As the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd. Sunita stepped onto the stage, her demeanor a blend of humility and resilience. She began, "When I embarked on this mission, I anticipated a swift return. However, space has its own plans and we must adapt." She recounted the initial days aboard the ISS, working alongside fellow astronauts Butch Wilmore, Nick Hague, and Russian cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. Their primary objective was to test the capabilities of the new spacecraft and conduct a series of experiments. But as days turned into weeks, it became evident that their return would be delayed. "Communication from Mission Control informed us of the technical glitches," she explained. "The Starliner faced propulsion issues, making it unsafe for re-entry. Our brief mission had transformed into an indefinite stay. The crew faced the challenge head-on, integrating into the existing ISS team and taking on additional responsibilities. They conducted numerous experiments, participated in spacewalks, and ensured the station's maintenance. Yet, the uncertainty of their return loomed large. Each day we hoped for news," Sunita continued. "The vastness of space can make one feel isolated, but our camaraderie kept us grounded. We celebrated holidays, birthdays, and even found joy in the mundane." Back on Earth, their prolonged mission became a focal point of public attention. Families awaited their return and the media speculated on their situation. The astronauts remained steadfast, drawing strength from their training and each other. "We knew our loved ones were anxious," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "But we also understood the importance of our work and the need for patience." Months passed and the crew adapted to their extended stay. They developed routines, engaged in virtual interactions with students and enthusiasts, and continued their scientific endeavors. The ISS, once a temporary abode, had become their home. "Space teaches resilience," Sunita remarked. "It challenges you physically and mentally. But amidst the challenges, there's beauty, the Earth from above, the serenity of the cosmos, and the bonds we form." As she concluded the first segment of her speech, the audience sat in rapt attention, moved by the tales of perseverance and unity. Sunita's journey was not just about the challenges faced in space, but also a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Sunita took a brief pause, her eyes scanning the crowd. The weight of her experiences seemed to linger in the air as she continued, her voice softer but more resolute. "Life on the International Space Station sounds glamorous, floating in zero gravity, witnessing Earth's beauty from above, but there are parts that no training on Earth can truly prepare you for," she admitted. "One of those is the silence." The audience leaned forward as she described the eerie stillness of space. While the ISS hummed with the sound of machinery and air filtration, there were moments when the quiet became a deafening reminder of how far they were from home. "There were nights," she confessed, "when I floated by the window and stared at Earth, this fragile, glowing blue sphere, and wondered if I'd ever touch its soil again." The technical malfunctions on the Starliner grew more complicated as months passed. Initially, the crew believed the problems could be resolved in a matter of weeks. But as engineers back on Earth worked tirelessly, new issues surfaced: propulsion system failures, navigation errors, and unexpected glitches in the spacecraft's docking systems. "We knew the risks," Sunita said, her hands gripping the podium. "Every astronaut understands that space travel is unpredictable. But nothing prepares you for the thought that you may not return." Despite the mental strain, the crew had a duty to remain functional. Sunita recalled how she leaned on Butch Wilmore, her crewmate, during some of her darkest moments. "We became each other's family up there. We celebrated milestones, but we also shared our fears. Butch had a way of making us laugh even when things felt hopeless." She smiled softly, recalling one such moment. On the 100th day of their extended mission, Butch surprised the team by organizing a Space Olympics. They competed in zero-gravity races, floating acrobatics, and even an improvised game of weightless soccer. "That day," she said with a chuckle, "we weren't stranded astronauts, we were just humans finding joy in the unimaginable." But the mental toll of isolation weighed heavily. Despite regular communication with family through video calls, the absence of human touch and the unpredictability of their return gnawed at them. "My mother's voice became my anchor," Sunita revealed, her voice quivering for the first time. "Every call, she would say, 'Beta, you'll come home. I know you will.' Those words carried me through sleepless nights." She described the physical struggles as well. Months in microgravity affected their muscles and bones. Routine exercise was mandatory, but the deterioration was inevitable. Simple acts like standing or walking, things people on Earth took for granted, would become a challenge when they returned. We had to fight our own bodies, she explained. Without gravity, your bones weaken, your muscles shrink. And yet every day we pushed through. Because we had to believe we were going home. By month 7, the crew's optimism began to waver. There were days when even Sunita, known for her calmness, felt the strain. There was a moment, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, when I questioned everything. I wondered if I would see my family again. If I would feel rain on my face or smell fresh air. The room was silent, many in the audience wiping their eyes as she revealed the emotional vulnerability behind the astronaut's suit. And yet, she continued, her voice rising with renewed strength, hope is a powerful thing. Every time we felt lost, we reminded each other there's a whole world rooting for us. The turning point came when NASA engineers finally cracked the propulsion issues. The announcement came during a routine systems check, and Sunita remembered the exact moment. I floated to the comms module expecting another delay. But instead, I heard the words we had been waiting for, Starliner is ready. We're bringing you home. The audience erupted into quiet murmurs of relief as she paused to gather herself, the rawness of that memory still fresh. But even with that news, she said, we knew the hardest part was yet to come. As Sunita concluded this chapter of her speech, the crowd felt the weight of her struggles, both the physical and the deeply personal. Her honesty painted a picture not just of a mission, but of the human heart's ability to endure the unimaginable. Sunita took a deep breath, her hands resting gently on the podium. The memory of that final stretch preparing to leave the International Space Station after nearly 300 days seemed to linger in her mind. When the order came to prepare Starliner for our return, it didn't feel real, she said, her voice trembling slightly. For months, our home had been the ISS. The thought of leaving was both exhilarating and terrifying. The crew began rigorous preparations. The Starliner's systems, now cleared of critical malfunctions, underwent a final series of tests. Even the smallest error could mean disaster during re-entry. We knew this wasn't just about us, Sunita explained. It was about the engineers who worked around the clock. It was about proving that human ingenuity can overcome anything. Despite the excitement, fear crept into their minds. Re-entering Earth's atmosphere was one of the most dangerous phases of any mission. Even with extensive training, there were no guarantees. The human body isn't built for the violence of re-entry, she said. We were about to hurtle toward Earth at 17,500 miles per hour. That kind of speed doesn't forgive mistakes. The day of departure arrived. In her speech, Sunita described every detail, the smell of the cabin, the weight of the spacesuit, the way her heartbeat pounded against her ribs as they strapped in. We buckled ourselves in and did what we had trained for thousands of hours. Every switch flipped had to be perfect. Every command executed without error, she said, her voice steady but heavy. As the Starliner detached from the ISS, Sunita stole one last glance at the station. It had been her sanctuary, her prison, and the place where she had learned to push beyond her limits. I whispered a quiet thank you, she said softly. That place had changed me forever. The fiery descent began. The cabin rattled with unimaginable force as the Starliner pierced the atmosphere. At nearly 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the heat shield bore the brunt of the inferno. There's a point during re-entry, Sunita explained, where radio communication is cut off. For those minutes, you're alone. No one on Earth can hear you and you can't hear them. She described the terrifying silence as they plunged toward Earth. Each second felt like an eternity. Sunita could feel the weight of gravity returning, an invisible force that crushed her chest and limbs. My body felt alien, she admitted. After months in zero gravity, the sudden pull was excruciating. Every muscle burned. But we held on because we knew home was waiting. The Starliner's parachutes deployed with a thunderous jolt, slowing their descent. Through the small window, Sunita caught her first glimpse of Earth's surface, vast deserts and winding rivers, so familiar yet impossibly distant. When those parachutes opened, I cried, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't care who saw. It meant we had made it. The final impact was hard, a reminder that Earth welcomed no one gently. The spacecraft thudded against the desert floor in White Sands, New Mexico, a cloud of dust rising as the capsule settled. When we landed, Sunita recounted, I closed my eyes and let the weight of Earth hold me. Gravity, something I had once taken for granted, now felt like a gift. Rescue teams swarmed the capsule, their cheers faint beneath the ringing in her ears. The hatch opened and the flood of sunlight was blinding. But nothing compared to the moment she felt the hands of the recovery team lifting her out. The first thing I did, she asked, a soft smile touching her lips. I touched the ground. My knees buckled, but I didn't care. I was home. Her body, weakened by nearly 300 days without gravity, struggled to adjust. Standing unassisted was impossible. Every step felt like walking on knives. It took all my strength to smile for the cameras, Sunita admitted. But inside I felt broken. Space takes more from you than you realize. In the days that followed, her physical rehabilitation began. Simple acts, sitting up, lifting a glass of water, even turning her head, became agonizing challenges. But through it all, she held onto a truth. I survived, she said, her voice unwavering. And because of that, I owed it to everyone who worked tirelessly to bring us home, to keep pushing forward. As her words echoed through the auditorium, many in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. Sunita's return wasn't just a story of scientific triumph, it was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and overcome. And in those moments of struggle, she concluded, I realized that coming home isn't just about touching Earth. It's about finding your way back to yourself. The auditorium was so quiet you could hear the faint sound of breathing as Sunita Williams shifted her stance. Her voice, though steady, held the rawness of someone who had walked the fine line between survival and surrender. Coming home, she continued, was only the beginning. People think the hardest part is space itself, but no one tells you how much it hurts to return. The audience listened, captivated, as Sunita described the grueling days and nights that followed her landing. Her body, once strong and agile, now felt fragile, betrayed by months of weightlessness. I had to relearn how to live on Earth, she said quietly. Muscles atrophied. Bones weakened. Even sitting upright felt like a battle. The simple act of standing on her own took weeks of therapy. She recalled how, on her first night back, she attempted to walk without assistance, a choice that led to a humbling collapse in her hospital room. I fell hard, she admitted, her smile tinged with sadness. And for the first time since landing, I broke down and cried. Not from pain, but from the fear that I'd never be whole again. Her family had been a lifeline during this fragile time. Sunita's voice trembled as she spoke of her mother, an Indian immigrant who had always taught her that strength came not from perfection but from perseverance. My mother held my hand as if I were a child again, she said. She whispered, you survived the stars, Beta. You will survive this too. Yet, the struggles were not only physical. Emotionally, the months of isolation had left scars invisible to the outside world. The fear, the uncertainty, those things didn't fade once she touched Earth. Space changes you, she confessed. It strips away everything familiar. And when you come home, the world feels louder, faster. You feel like you no longer belong. The lights in the auditorium seemed softer as she described her first night outside the hospital. She had asked her husband to take her somewhere quiet, somewhere real. We drove to the ocean, she said, her gaze distant as if reliving that night. I wanted to smell the salt air, feel the wind against my skin. For months I had floated in silence, surrounded by machinery. I needed to touch life again. She stood at the water's edge, the sand cool beneath her feet, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, the vastness of Earth overwhelmed her in a way even space had not. I realized then, she said softly, that I had taken the simplest things for granted. The feel of the ground. The smell of rain. The warmth of another person's hand. Recovery was slow, but she refused to give up. Every day she pushed herself physically and emotionally, reclaiming the life she had left behind. There were setbacks, but there were also victories. The first time she walked unaided, the first time she held her niece without trembling hands, the first time she laughed without feeling the shadow of space hanging over her. I wasn't the same person who left Earth, Sunita admitted. Space had changed me. But it also gave me a deeper gratitude for life, for love, for every precious moment. The mental toll was harder to articulate. For months after her return, she would wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced she was still in orbit. She struggled with a profound sense of isolation even when surrounded by loved ones. You carry space with you, she said, her voice heavy with emotion. The silence doesn't just fade. It lingers in your mind, your heart. And some days, it feels impossible to bridge the gap between there and here. Yet, through all the struggles, one truth anchored her, the profound responsibility of sharing her story. If her journey could inspire even one person to chase their dreams or face their fears, then every hardship had been worth it. I stand here today, she said, her eyes shining with tears, not because I was the strongest, but because I refused to let go of hope. And that's what I want you to remember, no matter how lost you feel, there is always a way back. The audience, deeply moved, hung on to every word. Sunita's story was more than a tale of survival, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She had faced the infinite void of space and the painful return to Earth, and through it all, she had emerged stronger, more grounded, and profoundly human. Life, she said, her voice steady now, isn't about the easy moments. It's about the fight. And I promise you, no matter how far you feel from home, you are never truly alone. As she paused, the weight of her journey hung in the air, reminding everyone that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to move forward despite it. Sunita Williams stood tall behind the podium, the weight of her journey etched into every word. Yet, as she gazed across the sea of faces before her, there was no bitterness, only gratitude. She took a deep breath and let her heart speak. In space, she began, her voice warm but resolute, I learned that we are far more connected to each other and to this planet than we realize. When you're orbiting 250 miles above Earth, you don't see borders. You don't see division. What you see is a fragile, breathtaking world that we all share. The room grew still, the gravity of her words settling deep within each listener. She knew her story wasn't just about a spacecraft malfunction or the physical toll on her body. It was about something bigger, about resilience, unity, and the indomitable human spirit. I want you to imagine, she continued, spending nearly 300 days where every breath depends on technology working perfectly. There is no fresh air. No sunlight on your skin. Every moment, you are aware that a single mistake could be your last. Her voice faltered for a moment, heavy with the memories of those tense, isolated days aboard the ISS. There were nights when the silence was deafening, she admitted, her expression softening. I missed the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. I missed hearing my family's laughter in the next room. And yet, I also found something extraordinary in that silence. She paused, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I found myself. For months, trapped in the endless void, Sunita had confronted fears she never knew existed. Fear of failure. Fear of never returning home. But within that fear, she discovered a new strength, one forged by the vastness of space and the fragile hope of Earth waiting for her return. There were moments I wanted to give up, she confessed, her voice cracking slightly. When my body hurt so much I couldn't bear to move. When the loneliness crept in, whispering that no one could understand. But every time I thought I couldn't go on, I remembered why I was there. Her lips trembled into a smile as she spoke of the letters from children she had read during her darkest hours. Letters filled with dreams of becoming astronauts, engineers, scientists. Letters from little girls who saw her and believed they, too, could reach the stars. I realized, she said softly, that my journey wasn't just mine. It belonged to every person who ever dared to dream beyond their limits. The weight of her message hung in the air, a reminder that even the most impossible journeys are worth taking if they inspire others to believe. And when we finally landed, she continued, when my feet touched the earth again, everything I had endured, the fear, the pain, the isolation, it all faded in the light of that first step. Her return to Earth was far from easy. The aches, the disorientation, the emotional scars, none of it vanished overnight. But as she stood in the warm sunlight, feeling the ground beneath her feet, one truth became clear. I wasn't the same person who left Earth, she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. And that's okay. Because we're not meant to stay the same. We're meant to grow, to become more than we ever thought possible. She took a deep breath, scanning the faces before her. Some wiped away tears, others leaned forward, hanging on to her every word. And I'm here, she declared, to tell you that no matter what challenges you face, whether it's gravity pulling you down or life pushing you to your limits, you are stronger than you know. And you are never truly alone. Her voice grew softer, yet somehow even more powerful. You carry the hopes of those who came before you. And if you keep moving forward, if you hold on to that hope, you will always find your way home.